This is probably the most expensive set of smartphone cameras I've ever tested. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra with photography kit. And there's actually some nice new camera features here. In Pro mode, switch to photo. And now you got a bunch of presets so you can quickly get the look that you want. And you can save your own custom settings and even import settings here. Now, regular cameras work with what's known as the exposure triangle, which is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. But most smartphones only have two settings that we can adjust because they have fixed apertures. Now, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra main camera features a stepless variable aperture, which goes from f1.63 to f4.0. So we can now implement this exposure triangle in a smartphone. In regular photo and video mode, open settings, and you now have 4 apertures to choose from, or you can just leave it in auto. And when you're in Pro mode, along with ISO and shutter speed controls, there's now this aperture control wheel. And using this, we can fine-tune exposure with 0.01 stop increments. We now have this EV button, or exposure value. So if you want to quickly adjust exposure, it's easy just to tap that and then use the wheel. So this is the white version of the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, which comes with this nice fake leather back and as well an aluminium frame. And then we've got this big circular lens housing, which really makes a feature out of the phone's cameras. I'd say it's definitely a nice looking phone, but it is quite heavy, and once you add the photographer's kit as well, it's well over 300 grams. At the tap of a button, switch the 14 Ultra into what Xiaomi calls Master Cinema mode. And essentially this is 10-bit high dynamic range video, which is going to be in the Rec 2020 color space. So basically we're talking about Dolby Vision. In Pro Photo mode, we can open settings and find the RAW photo options. With this enabled, we can shoot up to 16-bit RAW photos, and then we can take these into other programs and then edit them in Photoshop or Lightroom. Well, of course, you can also just edit them in the Xiaomi 14 Ultra itself, in the Gallery app. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra comes with 4 rear cameras, and they're all 50 megapixel, while the front camera uses a good quality 32 megapixel sensor. The main camera uses Sony's new flagship LYT900 1-inch image sensor, which was actually announced at the end of last year. The LYT900 also uses stacked CMOS technology, which allows for physically larger diodes. So without getting too technical, this is basically designed to allow the sensor to capture more light, and it gives the main camera an impressive 14 EV of dynamic range. So by comparison, the iPhone 15 Pro Max main camera has a 12 EV dynamic range. So it's a couple of notches better than the flagship iPhone. So we've got a 75mm equivalent floating telephoto camera, which allows the lens to adjust within the camera itself, resulting in a minimum focusing distance of only 10 centimeters. So this camera is really suitable for both close-up macros as well as for portraits. There's also this 120mm periscope telephoto, which is said to improve light intake by 44% compared to its predecessor, the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. And in fact, this is also pretty good for macro shots. You do get really nice sharp images from the tele cameras. As well, you're going to get an authentic looking shallow depth of field in photo and in video mode, which is really great for portraits. Like the Xiaomi 14, the autofocus switches between subjects very smoothly, and that's really great for focus changes when you're capturing video. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra also features a 12mm ultra-wide camera, which can stay in focus as close as 5 centimeters. So if you weren't sure you needed even one macro camera, you now have 3. And in video mode, there's also this super macro mode, which just zooms in on the subject. But using the telephotos as nature intended, you do get some nice crisp images. Now, the 14 Ultra comes with an AI enhancement feature, which is implemented when you zoom in from a distance. But I'm going to talk about that later. So Xiaomi have created the photographer's kit to go with the 14 Ultra. And there's two main parts, the case and the grip. So this one has a black leather back and this kind of metallic sides, although it's made of plastic. After you've got the phone into the case, you just slide on the grip and then you flick the lock switch, so it's locked securely in place. And this case allows you to mount filters using the 67mm filter adapter ring. So the other two rings that come with the kit are basically just decorative. And in mine, I've got a silver and an orange metallic ring for the decoration. And to switch rings, it's pretty easy. You just press the button here and then twist. And you can see that there's these two little red dots to guide you, so it's all pretty simple. And once you have the 67mm filter adapter, you can use all kinds of regular camera filters. So it's a standard size 67mm. You can get ND filters, mist filters, polarizing filters, and so on. And you can also stack those, of course, if you want to add 2 filters or more. So now all we need is someone to invent a 67mm mount, which allows you to add anamorphic lenses, and this is going to be almost the perfect kit. The grip has a shutter button, a record button, a zoom lever, and a control wheel, or a dial, whatever you want to call it. There's also a power bank within the grip, so when you mount the grip, it's going to start charging your phone. So this gives you some handy extra battery life. All the buttons and the wheel can be customized. And at the moment, I have the wheel set to the default EV, so I can easily adjust exposure. The shutter button can be switched between single and burst photos, for example. The zoom lever can be used to switch between cameras instead of zooming. And the kit also comes with a wrist strap. In Video Pro mode, when you swipe to open settings, you can now enable Xiaomi's log color profile. And this gives you a washed out, desaturated video, which is going to be better for color grading. And the nice thing about this is that it automatically creates a 10-bit color video, which is really cool because 8-bit video is far less useful for color work. As well, you can add a preview LUT and even import your own or third-party LUTs. When you apply the LUT here, it's not going to be baked in, it's just preview, and there's no actual option to do that if you wanted to. So the 14 Ultra is always going to output an untreated log file. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra now supports 120 frames per second 4K recording. So that matches the Sony Xperia 1 4 and the latest Samsung 24 Ultra. So we can now shoot super slow motion at 4K. And of course, if you compare that to the top iPhones, which are still limited to 60 frames per second if you're shooting at 4K resolution. Now, whereas the Xiaomi 13 Ultra selfie camera was limited to 1080p, the 14 Ultra can now record 4K video with the selfie camera. So all the cameras now have 4K video capability up to 60 frames per second. For 120 frames per second, you will need to use the main camera. So of course 8K video has been around in Androids for a long time now, several years. But the Xiaomi 14 Ultra supports 2 8K frame rates, 24 and 30 frames per second. So this does make it a little bit more versatile, especially as I do most of my work using 30 frames per second these days. So having 30 frames per second means I might just switch to 8K once in a while if it's good light and I just need that extra pixel boost. So you can shoot 8K video with any of the rear cameras and also in both regular video and pro video mode. So in some cases, phones that can shoot 8K do so only in the pro mode. So having it in both modes again just makes it more versatile. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra has 2 modes which activate smoother video stabilization. So we've got steady video and then we've got steady video pro. And both modes are limited to 1080p and 30 frames per second. But the video does come out pretty stable. These are a couple of shots that I got just handheld and just walking, and they come out pretty smooth. The 14 Ultra comes with Xiaomi's version of the iPhone's cinematic mode, which is called Movie Mode. And what it does is use masking to add a fake blurry background to mimic a shallow depth of field in video. When you switch to this mode, you're going to find that there are no options for frame rates, no option for resolution or to switch cameras, because basically you're locked into 1080p, 24 frames per second, and also main camera only. So there does seem to be some differences in how this works depending on the version you have, because I think the Chinese version limits the frame rate to 30 frames per second and not 24 frames per second. But in one respect, Xiaomi's movie mode goes one step further than iPhone cinematic mode. And not only does it add a blurry background, but it also adds motion blur. Xiaomi says this replicates the 180-degree shutter rule that is used to mimic the look of film cameras. So if your video doesn't have enough motion blur, it can look a bit harsh to the eye. And this is why, to get this nice smooth film look, we normally set frame rate to 24 frames per second and shutter speed to 1/48th of a second. Now the thing is, in bright light, we'd normally need an ND filter to get our shutter speed so low, but Xiaomi Movie Mode achieves a motion blur effect without using ND filters. So I'm presuming this is done by adding motion blur computationally. So that's pretty handy, isn't it? So in this mode, you can set a cinematic, widescreen 2.39:1 aspect ratio, or you can just leave it at the regular 16:9. So it's nice to have it, and it works pretty well, but overall, it's not really a match for the iPhone cinematic mode because basically you can't edit it. Sometimes with Xiaomi phones, there's so many features, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So in the one-pager that Xiaomi sent me, they talk about a feature called auto frame, and there's also another one called auto zoom. And while I remembered them being demonstrated at the MWC Barcelona, I could not find these features within the phone, so I had to do a little bit of detective work. First of all, I went back through my Barcelona footage, and then I found some where we were given a demonstration of the auto frame feature. Aha! I can see the demo phone is in movie mode, so now I know where to look. To open movie mode, there was nothing in the settings. Then I tapped the I button and I found that the feature is talked about under a heading called Smart Composition. And then I found it, the button here. This opens up the two features, but it's not actually called auto frame. It's now called Smart Composition. So that's why I was struggling to find it. And in this mode, the camera tracks people as they move about the frame, and using that big sensor, it creates a new frame. So it's like the camera is moving, following the subject, except actually it isn't. So this is with the Xiaomi 14 Ultra on a tripod, and I'm just moving around. So it crops part of the frame and then just gives you that cropped part. Auto zoom allows you to shoot an automated zoom so that it comes out nice and smooth. And you can actually go in here and adjust the duration of the zoom and the amount of the zoom. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra comes with a feature called Extended Depth of Field. If you have this enabled, when you use the telephoto lens to shoot at close range, you can choose between a shallow depth of field or an extended field of view. Extending the field of view should mean the background is less blurry. Now, when I tried this feature in the 14 Ultra, it didn't actually seem to make any difference. So I don't know if I'm using it wrong, but I pressed it. Maybe I just need to try that again, but at the moment I haven't got that to work. AI is probably the hottest topic in the tech and creative worlds right now. So every new piece of tech is going to come with this AI buzzword to try and get everyone interested. And predictably enough, the MWC event in Barcelona was full of AI this and AI that. But rather inevitably then, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra comes with an AI camera mode. So normally when we zoom in a long way with our smartphone cameras, we get this kind of artifact-ridden ugly mess. So in photo mode, after we zoom beyond 30 times, a red AI camera icon appears in the corner of the frame, And the camera will now use AI to enhance the photo. And it's actually generative AI, I believe. So if I take a photo and then quickly open it in the gallery, you can see this AI process in action. So after a second or two, it creates this AI sharpened image. Well, rather than sort of adding sharpening and smoothing, as cameras traditionally do, I'm presuming this is some kind of generative AI. But if you don't want it to do this AI enhancement, you can just tap to disable it on the screen. Or you can turn it off completely in the settings. So the feature is called Ultra Zoom and it's currently a beta. In settings, there's also a button to enable AI camera mode. So that's presumably the same thing. So I didn't quite work out what the reason for that was. The AI icon button seems to only pop up when it kind of feels like it. So unless you see this icon, it's not going to apply generative AI to your photo. So I found that the exposure of the selfie camera was acting a little bit strangely, especially when there's a strong backlight. So the background is almost completely washed out because it's trying to expose my face correctly. But when I tap on my face, the whole image goes completely dark. Because normally when you tap on something, the camera should set exposure for that thing that you're tapping on. But instead, it seems to expose for the background no matter where I tap. So something weird is going on there. I know that we can set exposure manually using the slider, but this is an expensive phone, so we should expect top level from all the cameras. And I do think that Xiaomi still has some way to go before we can say that they've produced a genuinely top level selfie camera. But hopefully this is just a kind of firmware glitch and they can fix it. But from what I'm seeing, it's pretty similar to the Xiaomi 14 selfie camera. It's about the same quality, maybe exactly the same quality. But if you choose good lighting, you're going to get good images with the selfie camera. And as well in photo mode, this problem with the blown out background isn't such a big problem because it uses multiple images to adjust the background. Now, do you enjoy making your photos and your videos look like they've been shot on film? If so, you might be interested in my recently updated Exploring the Film Look book, which you can now buy in the store on my Patreon page, or you can just get it as a member. So if you're a Video Creator Pro member on Patreon, you get that book and all the other books included, all the lessons, all the courses, and all the other extra content that I've got there, which is building up. I'm adding things, every maybe couple of weeks or so.